Revenge is on the menu today. We're going to talk about that as well as my new book, Entry Wounds, so stick around. What's up, guys? My name is Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer. I'm the author of Bad Parts and Entry Wounds, and welcome to my writing channel. Today, I'm all about revenge. Revenge is one of my favorite types of stories out there because when it's done well, it can make for some dark and exciting stories. But sometimes it's not done well. In fact, a lot of times it's not done well, and that's why I'm doing today's video. I want to teach you how to write the best possible revenge stories. I want to explain why the good revenge stories work, and I also want to give you some tips on how to structure out your revenge story. I have 3 steps for building a revenge story, but we'll get to that later on in the video. Right now, I want to answer the question, why do the good revenge stories work? And they work for a variety of different reasons. I have 4 specific reasons that I want to talk about today. The first one is desire, specifically the audience's desire meshing with the hero's desire for revenge. In a revenge story, typically you have a crime committed against your main character, and it's such a disgusting crime that the audience can't help but want to see that main character go after the villain and just beat the shit out of them. The second reason why revenge stories work so well is because they're satisfying. When we see a character who suffers from a crime and then they pursue the perpetrator and they go outside the law to do it, we envy those characters. We envy their ability to just say no to the law and to say no to their moral codes and pursue what is at the core of their emotional being. We wish we could be those people, and that's why we get invested in these types of stories. The third reason why good revenge stories work is because there is a cost to the pursuit of that revenge. It's not enough for a revenge story to be satisfying. You also need to show what a character has to give up in the pursuit of the revenge, and if they do at the end enact their revenge, what is lost? Do they lose a piece of themselves? Do they lose allies in the process? Do they lose the respect of loved ones? Do they get injured? Do they themselves die? What is the cost? If there is a cost in a revenge story, it makes it horrifying for the audience and it gets them very engaged with it. And then the fourth and final reason why good revenge stories work is because they incorporate internal conflict into their stories. Bad revenge stories focus too much on the action, but good revenge stories focus on what is going on in the character's head. How do they feel about the revenge? How does revenge conflict with who they are as a person? And I'm not saying that you have to write Hamlet if you're writing a revenge story. You don't have to have your character thinking about revenge from every possible angle. You can have a fast-paced revenge story, but make sure your character is doing some thinking along the way, and make sure that internal conflict is present to keep us on the page or to keep our eyes on the screen. Alright, so now that you know why revenge stories work, I'm going to teach you the 3 steps to building a revenge story, and they're very simple. First step is that you have the crime, second step is that you have the pursuit, and then finally you have the confrontation. We'll start with the first step and we'll talk about the crime. Now the crime is so important because it sets up your hero's motivation. It's what connects us to the character and it's what gets us to root for the character. We need to see a nasty crime in order to get behind a revenge story. Because if the crime isn't nasty enough and the hero's going after revenge, then we might judge them. But if the crime is something that is just vicious and disgusting and appalling, we can get behind any hero as they're seeking revenge. Now, one thing to keep in mind, before you actually show your crime, you need to make us care about the protagonist, and we should also care about what they're about to lose. If you think about the movie John Wick, early on in the story, he's mourning the death of his wife, he just attended the funeral, he comes home, he's at an empty house, and he receives a puppy from his late wife. She arranged to have it sent to him after her death, and he receives this puppy, and it's a moment of hope for him. We see him interacting with the puppy, there's this chance for him to not live alone, and there's a hope for him to have a better future. But of course, a few scenes later, that is taken away from him in the crime scene where the puppy is eventually murdered. Now, when you are showing us the actual crime early on in the story, you need to keep in mind 2 things. The crime should be painful, and the crime should be original. You need to make it as painful as possible so that it has impact on the audience, and you also want to make it original. You don't want it to be something we've seen a million times before. Once you've shown the crime and how your hero reacts to it, then you move on to the second phase of your story, and this is the pursuit phase. This is where your hero goes after the villain who committed the crime. Now, in the simplest types of revenge stories, you'll have the hero just killing a bunch of henchmen as they go in pursuit of the main villain who they eventually catch up with at the end of the story. But I think you can do better than this. I think what you should do is incorporate some different types of story elements or genre elements in order to make the middle of your revenge story more interesting. For instance, maybe you have the hero doing some detective work in order to track down the villain. Or you might incorporate a subplot that challenges the hero to reconsider seeking revenge. Or you might mix different genres. For instance, you might include a war story or a fantasy story or even some fantasy elements into your revenge plotline in order to make it more interesting. Think about Game of Thrones. When Robb Stark is pursuing revenge, he's also leading a war effort, and he has to balance out his vengeance with his need to be responsible and protect his people. Now, a couple other things to keep in mind during the pursuit stage of your story. Remember to show internal conflict. Have your character mulling over whether or not they should be doing this. Is it worth it? Do I have more to lose than to gain? What else can go wrong if I pursue this revenge? And then, of course, you want to also show the damage that is caused by seeking payback. What is the cost of pursuing revenge? Do you lose your allies as you're going after the villain? Do you lose parts of yourself? Do you lose respect? Do you lose other things? What is the cost that your hero suffers in pursuit of vengeance? Once you've finished with the pursuit stage of your story, then you move on to the final step, the confrontation. And this is where your hero battles the person who is responsible for the crime at the beginning of the story. This is a great opportunity to flesh out your villain if you haven't already. A lot of complaints about revenge types of stories is that typically in these stories the villain is just kind of paper thin, or it's just a sociopath or whatever. Just there's no depth to this villain. So you have an opportunity right here before the actual battle to have the hero engage in this intense conversation with the villain, and you can flesh out this villain and give us some reasons why they committed the crime at the beginning of the story, or you can at least hint at a compelling motivation for why they did what they did. Either way, you're going to have the hero and the villain fight one another, and the outcome is going to be one of three things. Either the hero is going to get revenge, they're going to choose not to get revenge, or the hero is going to get killed as they're trying to get the revenge. Now, keep your audience in mind when you are thinking about the ending for your revenge story. Do you want the audience to be satisfied? Do you want the audience to be horrified? Do you want a mix of the two? Sometimes you can have a revenge story where the hero does get the revenge, but shortly after they are killed or they suffer some kind of great loss. There are a lot of possibilities with endings to these types of stories, but you do need to keep your audience in mind. How satisfied do you want them to be, and how horrified do you want them to be? One revenge story that I would highly recommend is my brand new novel, Entry Wounds, and this is a fresh take on the revenge thriller. It's about a guy who picks up a haunted gun, and he learns that he cannot put it down until he kills 6 people with it. And while he's forced to kill people, he does have a choice of who he kills, so this is where it gets morally complex, and he has to decide who deserves to die. Should I kill the people in my life who give me a lot of problems, who make my life miserable, or should I find other solutions? Question of the day: what is your favorite revenge story? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of either one of my books. Also, be sure to check out my other videos, hit the like and subscribe buttons for me, share this video with a friend, and as always, remember to keep on writing.